Hi there, my name is Bella, and this is Faith Over Feelings podcast. I'm planning on using this platform to talk about everything faith and my spiritual life, while also navigating life as a young adult who still has all the same struggles and difficulties of any young adult, but who also has access to the best resource out there, which is Jesus and His Holy Spirit. And truly, that is the only resource anyone would ever need. I'm feeling a little bit awkward talking in front of a camera. Hopefully, with time, that'll feel a little bit easier. But I also just wanted to, before we get started, I guess, make something very clear. I'm not a preacher. I'm not trained to speak. I am not, a theologian, but I am just a girl who, I'm just a girl who has a relationship with Jesus and who knows that He has commended every single one of us to go out and preach His gospel. And so it's with that authority that I'm coming on here. That being said, I strongly encourage you that if you feel inclined to learn more about Jesus and to get closer to God, to go and seek that on your own time and try to have that relationship on your own, because that's the basis of everything else. So take everything I say with a grain of salt. These are my impressions. I'm truly just learning as I go and trying to share a little bit of my journey. But at the end of the day, the most important relationship is between you and God, and no one else can really get in between that. So, yeah. And so for today's episode, I wanted to talk about something that's been on my heart. And it's February right now. We just had Valentine's Day. And so love has been all around. You see hearts everywhere and you see people celebrating their loved ones. And I really do love this season. I think it's so important to celebrate the people we love and to demonstrate that we love them and all of that. But when I talk about God, when talking about love, the first thing that comes to my mind is God, because God is love. And without God, there can be no love, because it's like trying to have light, but God is light. And so the absence of God is darkness. So you can't have light without Him. And to me, love is just the same way. You can't talk about love without talking about God, right? But also thinking about all of that had me reflecting a lot on love and what it is to love and what it means to love, because many people think love is something that either happens or doesn't. I believe personally to love is a choice that is not always easy to make. Sometimes love can feel like a overwhelming feeling or sensation, or almost like an intuitive thing. And it can be that, but I believe loving is about choosing to treat people a certain way, right? And so I was reflecting upon that a little bit. And then God brought to my mind the verse in Mark 12:30-31, which I had open, but I can't find it right now. So let me just read. It says, "Love the Lord your God with all of your heart and with all of your soul and with all of your mind and with all your strength." Oh, for context, Jesus was talking to some Pharisees, and Pharisees were the people who were very strongly religious back in the days of Jesus, and they refused to acknowledge Jesus as the Son of God. And so they asked him, he was speaking, and I guess the Pharisees were around, and they asked him a question about commitment. And they asked, because also they were very strict about following the law and following all of God's commandments. And so they asked Jesus what was the most important commandment. And Jesus responded, that which I just read: love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and with all your mind, and with all your strength. And the second is this: love your neighbor as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these. And I believe it's so impactful that Jesus chose to put it that way, because He knew in His infinite wisdom, of course, He knew everything, but He knew that the Pharisees valued following the laws so strongly. And so to put these things as the most important commandments was a way to have them think about serving one another and loving one another, because perhaps that wasn't a very strong foundation in their beliefs. And that's basically the most important foundation in the beliefs of modern day Christianity and what I choose to follow, which is, to love God above all things, but also love our neighbor as ourselves, right? And that can be so much easier said than done. Because like I said, loving is a choice that can be so hard to make. You may think, no, loving is easy. And I agree to a certain extent, where I think it's easy to love the people who love you. It's easy to love the people who treat you well. It's easy to love the people who, you're in good terms with and all of that. But the truth is, as human beings, we're all flawed. And it's so hard to live a life where there's never going to be conflicts and misunderstandings and miscommunications. And so to love the people who don't necessarily try to please you always, to love the people who may have even harmed you in the past, to love the people who are just indifferent to you can be so hard. And that is where the grace of God and His mercy comes, to look past their actions and see them with eyes of love, which is what God has commended us. And so in that sense, it can be hard when the people you love, or the people who are important to you, let's put it that way, because we're separating love as an action from love as a feeling. So let's say the people who are important to you, who mean something to you, sometimes those people will hurt you. And sometimes that'll happen over and over again. And in those times, it's really hard to continue loving them, continue serving them, because to love is to serve, right? And to love is to sacrifice yourself for the well-being of the other person, for the well-being of other people. And so it can be hard to continue in that mindset when the people whom you're trying to love are consistently not showing you the actions that you would expect from them or that you'd wish they show you. That was a long way around that, but I think it made sense in the end. And so yeah, that's just the first point of where it can be hard to love. It's hard to keep loving when that love isn't being reciprocated with actions or with demonstrations or whatever it may be. For instance, you could really love someone, they could be really important to you, and there's just something they do that upsets you and you've brought it up, but their actions won't change. And in those times, it can be so tempting to just be like, oh, I'll treat them the way they treat me. If they're treating me well, I'll treat them better. But if they're treating me poorly, then I'll treat them worse, which goes completely against Jesus' commandments and what God intends for Christ-like living, right? Because remember, we're supposed to be imitators of Christ. Or, when that person simply doesn't seem to think about how things affect you and act with indifference towards you, it can be even harder to continue doing things that are of service to them or to help them or make their lives easier, But yeah, those are the times when it's even more important to continue serving and continue loving, no matter how hard it is. I would often ask myself, God, how am I supposed to keep doing this? How am I supposed to keep loving on this person who simply doesn't care about my feelings, who doesn't treat me with respect, who doesn't have any consideration for how their actions affect me? And there's a verse actually in the book of Matthew, chapter 5, verse 44. And Jesus says, "But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you." So this has an application for, yes, people who are actively seeking to harm you, but I believe it can also be applied to even the people who maybe aren't trying to harm you. Maybe they're just living their lives, but they don't realize how their actions are affecting you negatively. That's when you have to pray for them. You don't know what's going on in their lives. Only Jesus knows everything. Like, even if you're close to them, even if you think you know their struggles and know the things that they have a difficulty dealing with, At the end of the day, only God has the full view on each and every one of our hearts and our battles and our journeys. And so praying for them, bringing their life before God and ask for protection for them, ask for success for them, ask for all those things that you may not even necessarily want for them because your flesh is telling you to wish them harm the same way that you feel hurt by them. When you bring those people before God in prayer, you're not only doing something that's going to be beneficial to them, but you're actually doing something that's beneficial to you. Because number one, you're obeying God's commandment. And so obviously the favor of God is going to be turned towards you. But also you're sacrificing a little bit of yourself. You're killing your flesh. You're telling your flesh, listen, I know that you want for this person to feel the same hurt that they're inflicting upon you. But you're also telling your flesh, I don't care about how you feel. My faith is more important than my feelings. And if God is telling me to love this person, to serve this person, to pray for this person, then I'll continue to do that, even though it doesn't feel good at the time. Feelings at the end of the day are not a good parameter, a good thermometer. They're not a good measure of anything. In fact, there's a proverb that goes something like, there's a way that seems right to a man, but its end is the path of destruction, or something like that. It's almost 100% guaranteed that your feelings and your natural instincts will be wrong and will be misleading. So that's why you have to bring everything before God and ask him for divine revelation, ask him for discernment, ask him for strength and spiritual strength to overcome your feelings. And not just overcome your feelings a momentary or not just overcome your feelings in a sense of like, well, right now I'm feeling sad, so I'm going to feel happy. But as a daily choice to not have your feelings be what's dictating your life and your actions. So if your feelings are telling you, well, this person makes me feel hurt, I'm going to act in a way that also makes them feel hurt. You can choose to not submit yourself to your feelings, but surrender everything to God and ask him to lead your choices. And this is one of those things that truly is so much easier said than done. And that's why it's so important that you have a daily relationship with Jesus, that you have intimacy with him, that you can these issues up with him in a way that is so natural and so consistent, so that every single day you're examining yourself, right? God tells us to renew our minds every single day and to trust him with our issues. Even though your feelings may seem so overwhelming and so strong, they're nothing compared to what God has for you and the plans that God has for you. So surrendering your feelings and choosing to follow God's commandments instead of choosing to follow your heart is the thing that's going to set you apart and have you stop being so chained Sorry, I had a slight interruption, but what I was trying to say is having that daily relationship and intimacy with Jesus and being able to bring to him all of your feelings and tell him, God, right now I really want to do this that's going to hurt that person, or to not do something else that's going to possibly benefit them because I don't want them to be benefited. Bringing those feelings up with God directly and telling him exactly how you feel and how your feelings are trying to dictate your actions, it's what's going to help you not be enslaved to your feelings and instead able to look at your feelings, understand your feelings, even validate your feelings, but also understand that that cannot be the thing that's going to guide how you act and how you interact with people in this world. It's as simple as that, but it's also very hard to do, because if there's one thing that is really hard to overcome is our own feelings. So many issues start where people are being so subject to their own feelings and their emotions, and even things like their pride and, wanting to choose to follow their hearts. That's what the world's going to preach to you always, is follow your heart, do what's best for you, seek happiness. But if you're seeking happiness over seeking relationship with God, that's always going to lead you to a path that ends up with ultimately destruction. So that's not what we want at all. And also one thing I feel like helps me a lot when it comes to getting over my feelings and not feeling so what's the word? Not feeling a victim all the time, because my natural inclination is to put myself in that position of, oh, everyone does me wrong, no one understands me, and yada, 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 which is just how I am. I've always been a very sensitive person. But one thing that I like to remember in those moments when I'm feeling like, the world is conspiring against me is Jesus has literally felt the exact same way and worse. Like every time I feel rejected, I remember Jesus was rejected more than any other person that has ever lived. He was also betrayed. And so every feeling that I have where it's like, oh my gosh, like this is so unfair, that person, they just don't, whatever. Think about what Jesus had to go through. Like his closest friends betrayed him. He was abandoned by every person that he trusted. And he also had to go through something very difficult all alone in the physical world. Like no other person was there with him in that moment, but he clinged onto God, and knowing that even if you can't feel God all the time, he's always there for you. And his plans are always the best plans for you. So as long as you're keeping yourself in check and making sure that you're listening to God's voice and following what he's telling you to do and where he's telling you to go and this and that, you're always going to be under his protection. And as long as you're following his will for your life, there's no way it could end up wrong or it could end up bad, because you've already conquered victory in him at the end, which is such reassurance. Doesn't matter if you feel right now like people aren't able to provide you with everything that you wish they could provide you with, that being validation or understanding or being treated with respect and all of that, then it's okay, because at the end of the day, you have Jesus and his love is so overwhelming. And once you're able to understand that, it can truly fulfill your entire need for acceptance. Like Jesus has accepted you, and he has died so that you can be separated from your sin and able to live, and not only live, but live in eternity with him. So, although it can be hard to overcome those feelings sometimes, and trust me, I understand, I think the ultimate message that I wanted to bring with this episode is that whenever you feel rejected, whenever you feel like you're not being valued or that you're not understood, just remember that Jesus doesn't reject you. He understands you. He values you so much, and that's everything you would ever need. And remember that as human beings, we're all flawed, and you're bound to encounter people who are going to disappoint you. I would even say everyone in your life, sooner or later, is going to disappoint you at some point. That doesn't mean they're bad people. And that doesn't mean also that, you can't be friends with them. Because also nowadays, there's like the idea that, whatever, I'm just going to drop this person, I'm just going to drop that person. And while some people are negative influences in our lives and shouldn't be necessarily we shouldn't necessarily be super close with, there's also the fact that as people, we're going to fail, and we're going to fail each other. So understanding that, number one, you're not perfect also. So while you may feel like no one gives you the affirmation you need, no one gives you the validation you need, don't forget that your actions also impact other people. And even I have been faulty in that I would sometimes be like, well, this person doesn't see me, or I feel like they don't understand me, this and that. But then I was just being so egotistical and prideful and stuck in my own ways, in that I just wanted to receive everything from people, but I wasn't willing to give even the same things that I wanted to receive. And so it's like, how can you expect for people to always provide you with everything you need, but also you don't want to even get out of your own way to be a good friend or to listen to people or reassure them that you're there for them, you know? And also sometimes out of your own bubble and just seeing that other people have struggles too, and that to be there to support them also. Like, it's not just, oh, everyone needs to support me in my difficulty, but also not being able to look at outside of yourself and realize that you're not being a good friend, you're not supporting them because you're so busy looking at your own struggles, you know? So there's the two sides of that. And yeah, overall, just remember that Jesus is here for you. And even when you're struggling, like sometimes I find myself with that pit in my stomach and all those negative feelings and those voices in my head trying to get me to do things that I would regret later. I find myself calling on to Jesus and just being like, God, these feelings are so heavy for me right now, but I know your burden is light and your yoke is easy. And I can just hand him anything that I'm struggling with, and he'll take that and he'll put it upon himself. So like, it's as easy as that. And I know it's easier said than done. But if you're ever struggling with that, don't forget that you've got someone who's there for you and who has conquered everything. So your problems may seem big, and I'm sure they are big to you, just like my problems are big to me. But they're not as big as our God. They're not as big as our intercessor. And we have a Father in heaven who loves us as his children, who made us his children, and who cares for every single issue in our lives. He cares to not only give us our need, but about the desires of our heart. And you can open up with him and you can trust him with everything. And isn't that amazing? So yeah, I'm happy to be starting this podcast. As you can see, it's not something necessarily very planned. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing as of now, but I'm hoping to get better as I go and to always let God speak through me. Nothing that I say or bring forth is out of my own intellectual abilities or anything like that. I'm just sharing what God has put in my heart because that's what he's told us to do. And I hope that I've been able to reach you in some way or give some advice that will be useful to you somehow, sometime, somewhere. And yeah, if you like this episode, make sure to tune in for the next one. You can subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'll also leave all of my social media linked just in case. And make sure to like this video if you like it, and drop any comments that you have with advice or feedback, or even any thoughts that you may have had throughout the episode. I can't wait to hear what you think. And God bless you and have a good day. Bye.